Welcome to this Mastery Empowerment course from New Earth One Network. This is designed exclusively for your higher self connection and embodiment. Brought to you by New Earth One Network. We are here with Shamanic Astrologer Erik Roth, who has a lesson for us today. Thank you for being here, Erik.
Thank you, Lauren. It's really good to be here and excited to contribute.
Enjoy the course.
Hello, everyone. I'm Erik Roth, Shamanic Astrologer, and I'm here to bring you a introductory class, a class that talks about what astrology is on a fundamental level. And so we're going to get into some different understanding, or maybe kind of a more basic understanding of astrology and our relationship with it, and how that shows up as our relationship with the cosmos. Okay, here we go, and down this road, this journey through the stars, through the system called astrology. This could be called a tool, philosophy, symbology, mythology. It really is all of those things. It does have a little bit of science in that, and that it draws from the movement of the planets and the movement of the Earth itself in relationship to those planets, the moon and the sun. So we connect into this in this free class. We're going to connect into this and learn a little bit more about why this is here. Why do we have that? What does it really mean? In mainstream astrology, I mean, it's used. One sees horoscope, one sees, their daily horoscope, or they look at an astrology chart or see their sun sign, all of that as part of astrology, but it really only conveys just a sliver of what astrology is. So I've titled this Astrology Standing on the Earth because it is this perspective, our experiential perspective of being on this planet and our relationship to that which is around us. Not just necessarily in the sky, but our relationship to the seasons, our relationship to the imagery, the archetypes that live within us, and also as part of us, outside of us. And these things are primordial. These things are live on a very deep level. So this is looking at the foundation of our relationship with earth and sky. Obviously, I can't fit everything into this video in a sort of a welcome to astrology segment here, But this gets people in a position where they might be able to go, oh, well, what's that? And it would invoke some questions, some curiosity, some inquiry into the fabric of what astrology is, where it came from, and its process at this time, and how we see it now while being on this planet Earth and our relationship with it. So, astrology is this experiential journey. What we see, what we feel, what we sense, and what we experience. So, what we see essentially with our eyes, but there's something deeper and richer there than just a sense of like being, oh, we see a tree or we see a star or we see a moon. There's something more to it than that, more dynamic, that is more metaphysical, more spiritual, that gets much more into a space where um, more thoughtful, into a space that's conscientious of that which is around us. The and I'll talk about this in a later slide. As above, so below. It really is that. It's that sense that we are here on this planet, witnessing, seeing, not just with our eyes, but with our mind and with our heart and our soul. It's seen on all these different levels, and to some degree, even with our obviously, when we talk about these other senses that check in too. Feel, meaning not just the emotion that is comes up, that is invoked, but sort of a deeper feeling, a sort of this uh, every human being on some level, some much more than others, some almost at a bare minimum, or almost non-existent, depending on the person. A certain level of empathy, and which is just, it just doesn't mean that, oh well, I feel for that other person because I know, I can pick up what they're feeling. And it's all about the process of that happening, but it's also feeling into the experience itself, what feelings are coming up, and obviously emotions as well. It could also trigger memories. It could trigger unknown experiences that may be something along the lines of some dream or some vision we've had, something that connects us beyond ourselves, beyond this physical realm. So the scene and this feeling is really connected. All four of these um, statements in here, what we see, what we feel, what we sense, what we experience, they're all connected. So what we're feeling is in the moment. It's like checking in with ourselves, feeling into what we are feeling. What are we? And in fact, the most important thing in dreams, and this is what I get from when I read books that have to do with psychology and their relationship, and when the topic is about dreams, is what are we feeling in the dream? And I would say that there is a certain level of significant importance of, if we get in that level beyond seeing into the feeling, what are we feeling in that in particular moment? So whether it's looking when we're looking at the moon, or we are seeing hearing the birds, what are we feeling more than just the other five senses coming in? There's something more significant that comes into us, or that can potentially come into us. What we sense, what we sense is, when I say that, is really technically all five physical senses, but also beyond that into, you might say, um, the morphing of the senses, and how They are connected on a soul level. What we might even say, oh, I'm sensing that I'm sensing somebody watching me, for example. We can sometimes experience that where we get a feeling that we're being observed by, say, another life that visually, our eyes can't detect at that moment, but we can feel. It's not necessarily 100% guarantee. It could be echoes of previous experiences, but in a large degree that can happen. We can experience a sense of like, oh, what's around us. So in the same vein, we can connect into uh, the sky, the sun, the moon, and we can sense into our our journey there. What is happening? Especially, it's not necessarily just like a sense of like a one-time connection. This can come from a sense of having multiple over years of times, or many days of times, or months of times, where you're out there under the sky, or your experience with the sun, or other types of activities, and you pick up a certain sense about it that is more than the sum of the collection of events. Or perhaps it's a tenure in a particular job, or the evolution of your family and your relationship to that. It's a sense into that space, and all of these traits that I'm talking about here are connected to astrology. And then, of course, how we are as human beings, uh, to some degree, is directed by our experiences. Not entirely, fully, but yeah, to a large degree, experience communicates to us that process, and then we can have breakthroughs, we can have turns, we can step backwards, depending on how we define backwards or forwards, that experience with us. So let's take a deeper look at this. In uh, ancient times, prior to the rise of uh, the monotheistic religions, and sort of this paradigm we're still in at this point, our experience is this this place that we are here on this planet, looking at the sky, looking at the pattern of the sun, the moon, the seasons, the way what stars might come up in a particular time of year. It's this sort of this temporal or seasonal experience that we have. And in astronomy, they would call that geocentric. It's like, oh, yeah, we're centered here on Earth, and we're looking at around us, and we're experiencing what we're experiencing there. It's not an intellectual. I mean, there's intellect in that, but it's not necessarily just a purely intellectual exercise. It's a holistic experience here. Now, the difference between that and heliocentric is just simply a understanding that the Earth orbits the sun along with all the planets, and then of course knowing galactic centric, we could say that the sun orbits the center of the galaxy in the Milky Way. But of course, we have our personal experience here. What affects us the most is that essential geocentric. Not to say that that the sun revolves around us, but it's our experience with the seasons and the movement of the Earth that dictates to some degree our experience of our life, um, and especially when there weren't these enormous urban centers that blocked out the stars, um, due to light pollution and even sometimes distractions from sound pollution. Um, Long before that, we had a direct relationship with the sky, and it was part, kind of embedded in us, embedded in our the structure of who we are, how we innately look up when we're connecting with source or creator, God, great spirit. We're looking up, we're looking up into the heavens. And even just the idea of calling it the heavens tells you something right there. It's really deeply embedded in us. So that experience and our relationship and how important um, stretching ourselves out into the sky and how important it is to have the interaction, the relationship between the sky and the earth. And a lot of what has, and a lot of the ancient structures were built because of that relationship to the sky. And if you look around and peruse various resources from studies of archaeology, some studies of temples that have been uncovered, or even the pyramids and the standing stones around the world, they all have a relationship with the sky in one form or another. And whereas the pyramids weren't just merely tombs, they had something much deeper and richer that were grown into that. So it's our experience and our experiential journey through this. And in later courses, it would be something that I would talk about where, okay, we have certain phases, and this is where we can talk about the planets and the sun and the moon more deeply, and why we are connected to it, and what influence there is from that relationship to the solar system. So, but this is just a welcome to astrology introductory um, piece here, so we won't go into too much complexity, uh, and but I'll give you certainly some basic information that'll be really helpful, I feel. Okay, so what we see here, it's in the sky, our location on the ground. It's a moment in time. It's that capturing that moment. On the screen here, we see that the moon is in the phase of just about the first quarter there. That's roughly. And this means that it is about to set, maybe a few hours away from setting in the west. First quarter meaning it's between the eastern and western horizons. Last quarter as well, except that last quarter is, comes up at a different time of day. Uh, so we're having an experience. We call it quarter, but to our eyes, it looks like half the moon is being illuminated. And really, in reality, that's truly the case. We could call it a half a moon, but the quarter moon has certainly stuck around, and it's kind of in our the terminology, and deeply embedded into the language across the world. And I mean, just what we see. Okay, so what we see though is also important about where we are and what time of day. That adds to our visual experience at that moment. It could be partly cloudy. There could be some additional light pollution that blocks out a lot of stars, or we could be under, say, in a desert away from a city, and we see, you know, thousands of stars above our head and all around us. So those all play a role and they've all played a role in various cultures and how they create, the stories that a mythology that came out of that. So they were all part of that. They were all part of that, bearing witness to that and their own personal experience with it. This is what created, spurred on all kinds of uh, I say religion, spiritual practices. This is it really is really powerful. You don't realize how powerful. Just as the moon by itself, but we could say the same with watching, say, Saturn through the years, or Mercury, or any of the other planets. We have a particular we see this and we see it going through groups of stars, or how far away from the sun it might be, or when the moon and a particular planet come together. There is something that we witness here that directly uh, gets embedded into our stories. And it could be a moment in time. It could be that the moon itself could be nearly at a setting place, or it could be just that we could see the moon in the daytime. So it could be just that we don't see its full light, but we're seeing this celestial body up in the sky, but we don't see the stars. And or we could be there could be certain weather conditions that influence our state of mind and how we experience all of that. All it's the totality of that, totality of our experience, what we're visually seeing, that draws that in, um, that can influence us. And feeling and sensing. This is really really important around us, as within, as without, meaning what's outside of us, within being within ourselves. And what we're feeling, what we're sensing into all of that is truly a vital component of our overall, total experience. So I've been to many and varied spots on the planet that have had ancient writings or petroglyphs. Um, uh, Southwest U.S. has numerous uh, glyphs on it. There are places in the Northwest as well, out in the United Kingdom, or Great Britain area. But you can find these just about everywhere. And some of this has to do with the sky. And it's their feeling and sensing into it that helped kind of create representations. And then we, as human beings, going back to the scene slide, we can see the evidence of that, and that existed for a very long time. There's a great example of that in um, this really impactful documentary called The Cave of Forgotten Dreams, that went into this cave that has representations, has visual representations, or carvings in their petroglyphs, and pictographs that are over 30,000 years old. And well, there's one particular one that has a representation of of a constellation, what astronomers still call Taurus, but it's essentially the bull, Bull, and it's where where this smaller star cluster Pleiades is, and the Eye of the Bull, Aldebaran, and it's got this V-shaped appearance with the points of the horn above the V shape. And so you could see that very, very clearly in that video. And they, and we, to paint a picture of it, to draw it, to carve it in, means that they went to a level an extra level of importance to the people that were there, and how they experienced it, and how important it was in their lives. And there were other paintings there of animals that existed during that time, which were just spectacular. Um, and so there's this there's this importance of what we feel and sense, and they were sharing their stories with these representations, as well as verbally with each other, orally with each other here. Um, and this is a cave that's in France, that was found, and it's not necessarily open to the public, but it is talked about a lot in that particular documentary, Cave of Forgotten Dreams, that was out several years ago. Encourage everyone to watch that. It truly was very impactful for me. Um, so around us, within, without, we are connecting with it. We are participating in it. We are experiencing it and fully connecting into that process. So we can see how that documentary just is a great um, symbol of how long we've been connected, to the night sky, to our relationship to the earth and the seasons, and of course our experience as above, so below. I kind of illustrated that a bit in the last slide, and this gives us a sort of greater level of understanding. There's a picture there in this particular slide that is of Callanish, and this is on an island out there in Scotland, in the north part of Scotland, just off the west coast of Scotland, northwest coast of Scotland. I was there in 2019, and I got to really experience some just incredible ancient um, my feeling or sense. I got to experience essentially a connection to those standing stones and what the people of that time were connecting into. That's again a sense of it. It wasn't that I knew everything that was going on there, but when I mean, it depends on how sensitive a person is. I certainly had an experience where I was touching the stones, and I could feel the, I don't know how else to describe it, but it was sort of almost like a feeling of the memory of the planet, or the memory of what went on there, and how important it was, and how the arrangement of those stones uh, was more than just a calendar for the sun and the moon, but that it related to them a really important spiritual journey for the peoples that lived there, uh, 5,000 years ago or more. Those are really old. And when you look up and you see the sky, and you're trying to uh, you're trying to connect the sky and the earth, and to feel into it. There's hundreds of other places around the planet that have this kind of a connection, and there could have been much more thousands of years ago that have since been buried, disappeared, eroded, that we're unaware of, potentially. So this is again a really powerful image. And let's say you look up into the sky. What do you experience when you say lay on the earth and look up and see the Milky Way, or see the full moon? What does one experience? And that is, there's something there. There's something that comes in. It may be sometimes colorized by your maybe recent thoughts, or maybe there was a even a traumatic event that happened recently, and then there could be other things that could colorize that. But we can get to a certain point in meditation where we can pick up other beyond our recent experience, that there's something uh, outside that, sort of that beyond the veil, and that is also part of astrology. It connects us all to that space, that in between space. Okay, so Earth and sky, and the relationship of Earth and sky. So when we stand or sit or perhaps lay under the sky, we experience something that goes well beyond the intellect. Um, we see, sense, feel, hear an experience of a world as a being living on the skin of this planet. So this is a really important uh, connection, or statement here. It really does encompass that. And then at some point, we begin to develop an understanding. We begin to develop something that brings a sense of order into the greater pattern. One of the things about astrology, I think it was uh, some of its origins were an attempt to create order in the world around with all the chaos that was around us. I mean, perhaps at certain points, it was just simply survival. And then eventually it got to a point, maybe in evolutionary history, depending on one's perspective, that we're able to cognitize what we were seeing and be able to connect with the pattern instinctually or intuitively in our lives, and perhaps find some primal energy or primal understanding of what we are experiencing, and where the intellect, or where the mind comes in, where the it kind of evolves out of that space and starts to, like, okay, well, I can figure this out. I can start to put this together. And you know, the passage of time, the earth spins, the sky changes, and further information, further data, further knowledge drops in. So some of the major points in this is the sun has an apparent movement across the sky. Obviously, it's because of the spinning of the earth. What we see, we see where and when it rises and sets. So we see that, we experience that, and that's some of the inspiration and the need to create a calendar to understand the the chronological portion of this, so that they could create, essentially, I mean, one of the bases for civilization, in order to have um, you know a sort of routine, a regularity, survival, to be able to live longer. There's all these things that connected to, especially as groups, as communities, as tribes, as eventually, larger areas that house many thousands or more people. We feel it, as I shared before. There's a feeling into what comes, and that could even be the seasons, what we can even sometimes taste in the air, smell. There's something there. There's something that our senses go, that are, more than just simply a particular cause and effect. That something goes beyond it. Um, the stars, there's patterns, they rise and fall. That's one of the major things that they were trying to attempt when they built ancient structures, and why we have calendars. This is our connection to that. It's a the our current calendars essentially, suppose it was originally solar based, and it still is to some extent, but the turn of the calendar from one year to another is kind of an arbitrary area, or has kind of ancient roots to the time of the solstice, which is typically around December 20th or 21st, winter solstice here on in the northern hemisphere, and summer in the southern hemisphere. And so then there's that period in between. I mean, the sun doesn't really get any farther south. That's the maximum point it gets, as far as south, is the December solstice up here in the northern hemisphere, where about uh, over 80% of the population on the planet lives, the equator and north. Um, so we have that relationship there. And I personally, spiritually speaking, I kind of look at the December solstice as the start of the new year. It's the rebirth of the sun. It's a area that has been proven to, well, be the sort of the channel for the why quote Christmas falls on the 25th. It's that right after the point where there is that the movement of the sun starts to drift a little bit north in that time period. So there is that, and it has major connections to pagan, uh, uh, Old Wiccan connections and other spiritual traditions and religions that existed long before Christianity. That was part of the experience. And then, of course, it evolved into when they got to Christianity, they kind of borrowed some things from different places in order to attract more people. But again, it's still an honoring of the solar experience, the rebirth of the sun at that point. The time of the most minimal light is the time where the sun starts to slowly expand its light, or I should say, getting a little higher in the sky, especially here in the northern hemisphere. The color of night, the day slowly brightens and darkens in subtle ways. There's also connections there. If one is really outside a lot and experiences the subtleties of the different colors and the magic that takes place, it's pretty remarkable. Um, and okay, so each day of the month brings an awareness of the seasons, the phases of the moon. So there's all these different things that are taking place, and these major points, the solstices, the equinoxes. There's also the points that are in between solstice and equinoxes, four other points, which relate to old holidays, Beltane and Samhain, which is now essentially Halloween. Beltane is essentially May Day, and then there's Groundhog Day, which is essentially the beginning of February. That's the in between the December solstice and the March equinox. So we have these holidays that kind of uh, evolved out of the old ways, and so but so it has a lot to do with our our desire to honor the changing of the seasons, to honor and uh, the continuity of the relationship with the sky and the planet Earth. So astrology, here is a interesting definition, and um, what I wrote here, it's essentially generated from our mind, but also our senses and our soul, taking in the patterns of the earth and sky. And when we do that, that's when meaning comes up. And it's like the meaning a full like totality of all of that together. And each person's going to have their own unique meaning. And we can read about it in different sources, or from people, or from books, or online, or essentially in the sky, and our experiences with that. We can put it all together, and then it alchemizes into something else and gives us a certain level of meaning. Astrology is a way to connect to that. It is the encompassing of all of that. And it's not, astrology doesn't have, I don't feel like it has necessarily, quote, all the answers here, but it is a powerful tool. It is a powerful way, a powerful tool, powerful language, philosophy, um, that we can utilize in our lives to help us, to help our journey, to align with our soul's intent. Astrology has that. And the version that I work with primarily is shamanic astrology, which really has a more powerful way of tapping into our experiential relationship with the earth and sky. So, in fact, the in ancient times, and I'm imagining still to some degree today, that shamans from long ago, they were, there's certainly evidence, and I know that uh, Joseph Campbell has written about this, um, and the relationship of the sky and the shamans who connected into the different figures, the forms that the star groups made and the planets, and brought that into imagery here on the earth when they did particular rituals or ceremonies and connected with that. And when they traveled to get knowledge from these other worlds, the other realms in the psyche, realms beyond ourselves and in spirit, they connected into those realms. So, okay, let's oops, let's dive into another layer here. This is the layer of what the zodiac is. Okay, so um, one could say that this is like the second portion of this class. So zodiac, the signs, more and more people are familiar with this. Sort of in a popularity in mainstream. They've heard the word. Most people have heard the word zodiac or sun signs or what's your sign. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this. Again, I'm not going to go too deep into describing all 12 signs. That would be for future classes, courses. The signs themselves, signs of what we call the zodiac, are primordial images within the earth and within ourselves, our psyche, deep in the collective unconscious. These are things that have existed since we've been around at the very least. In fact, some of the oldest, and I shared with you some imagery from that particular uh, documentary, but I think even older than that, or at least the oldest things that some of the found is of the representation of the mother. This is these mother figurines, the goddess figurines that have been found throughout Europe and Asia that are tens of thousands of years old. And they relate to that particular archetype, to the greater goddess, the mother, the one goddess, sort of that embodiment of the feminine as the sort of the power of life and life and death. So these things are ancient. So of course they're all 12 of these signs probably have quite an ancient storyline. Some much more than others, like the mother archetype, which relates a lot to Cancer, the sign of Cancer. But again, there's definitely some blending of archetypes in some of these images. So each of these 12 signs represents a vast and deep imprint upon humanity. So it's not like these things are just static, that they don't evolve, or they don't. The essence of it still has a certain core essence that really doesn't change, but it's in the context, it's in the content of our lives in different time periods that can evolve with it. And so the essence is repurposed, if you will, over long periods of time. So as I share here, each sign has dozens, if not hundreds, of different types, various types that can be expressed through us, but also outside ourselves as well. One could say that we are, great alchemical experiments psychologically. And those experiments we're always working with in different various ways. And there are, many billions of different combinations, at least now currently on this planet, at the time of this recording, close to, between 7.7 or and 8 billion people, somewhere in that zone, as we get closer and closer there in the population. Um, so when we say, oh, you're born under a certain sign, so what does that represent? Well, in Western astrology, I'll talk about the different types of zodiac as well. The signs are seasonal, or according to Robert Powell, he's a researcher and written a book called the History of the Zodiac. Um, Written a book about Western astrology, and that with some correspondences to the Eastern version, in meaning from India. The signs are directly connected to the earth seasons. They are not to do with the constellations. They're but but still, there's still a relationship there. So it's not like there's no correspondence, but it it's our relationship first with the earth, that layer, that inner layer that comes first, and the seasonal relationship that comes first, and then it gets into the level outside, into the star field. So what we have here is these temporal signs, as you see on the screen. Temporal meaning in time, in time. Seasonal, I can use that term, but obviously in the southern hemisphere it's flipped. I know that there hasn't been all that much research done by astrologers as to the seasonal energy, as far as the seasonal energy and the signs, say for people born in South Africa or Australia, as opposed to those born in the U.S. or Europe or South Asia. So there's again different relationship there. Um, that's obviously a little deeper territory. I'm not going to necessarily get into at this point. But 12 signs are seasonal or temporal, and it's our relationship with them that is first and foremost. So if we have a particular planet in a sign, it means it's that time of the year, that particular part of the season that the Earth was experiencing, at least in the northern hemisphere. Um, that creates the embodiment, the essence of that particular sign. So um, that's really important to know, and the that's where we get the term sun sign. But if a planet, say Venus, is in a particular part of that territory where the sun would be at a particular time of year, then the Venus would be in a sign, that would be the sign it would be in. So let's say if Venus was in the territory, in this part of the sky that where the sun would be, say, in early January, then Venus would be in the sign of Capricorn, before moving into Aquarius later. So this is what creates it, and there are many tables that are easy to access out there, either online, mobile devices, or in books, magazines. There's many different sources that computer programs that can tell us, where a planet is as far as mathematically. But you can also, in a more real world circumstance, look up into space, and if you study it, if you connect with it, you can understand what sign a particular planet is in roughly. Um, and again, the boundaries of that, it's kind of a little gray area there, because it's like, well, what is the difference between 29 degrees one sign and then 0 degrees another sign, which is essentially just a mathematical boundary. But you know that, of course, would be a topic for another time. I'm just trying to get some basic material out there for everyone here. Okay, so what is the zodiac? Well, this is really an important question, and the word zodiac comes from ancient Greece. It's essentially meaning circle of animals or circle of images, forms. It originally related to the constellations and the images associated with them, but also the names of the signs themselves grew out of that constellation. But again, it's talking about different things. The essence of a seasonal essence, as opposed to the mythology, the symbology, of a constellational group, a group of stars, or an asterism. Um, the constellations and signs are not the same, but some crossover in their psychic imagery with humanity. Um, but they have some crossover in the psychic imagery with humanity, so that over 2,000 years ago, they were, you might say, roughly lined up together. And that was around the time a person named Euctemon, and I've got it down here on the screen here, about 2,500 years ago in the ancient Mediterranean. I think he's related to Grecian. Um, essentially came up with the concept of the seasonal signs. Um, and so it was noticed because various sky watchers, astronomers at that time, were seeing observers, were seeing the difference after, tables, star tables that were recorded hundreds of years ago, and they were seeing a difference of their position at a particular time of year, say 100 years later, say many decades later. Well, they noticed that and like, oh my gosh, there's this thing called the precession of the equinox. So they realized like, oh my gosh, well, so what's the solution here? And that's essentially the seasonal signs. It's our experience with the seasons that the realization came through that defined the signs. And this is right around the time when personal charts, natal charts started to come out around 500 BC, 400 BC, somewhere in that zone. And that's that's really gets into the history of astrology. But that was what we essentially the origins of the especially the Western zodiac. But there was again a lot of crossover between sidereal or Eastern astrology and Western astrology at that time. It wasn't like divided as it is now. And then here we go. This brings the bridge to the next stage here. There are two major kinds of zodiac. There are other zodiacs out there, but for the purposes of this introduction, this welcome to astrology, is that these are the two main branches of the zodiacs. One is the tropical zodiac, which is on the Earth. There's these bands that are at a particular range away from the equator. Um, that are connected to the tilt of the Earth, that represent the tropics, Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn, the different solstice points, and are still named that. And that's why it's called a tropical zodiac, because of that. It's connected to the tilt of the Earth and the seasonal variation that the Earth experiences due to its relationship to the sun and the moon. So this is, the whole interconnectedness between these celestial bodies. And then we have, but again, it's a sign based. It's sun sign based, essentially solar based. I mean, it's the essence of the seasons and the in time where we are as a human being on the planet. Sidereal or sidereal, and there's different pronunciations of that. This is the one that's better known as the basis for Ayurvedic or Vedic or even Indian astrology from India. And that has there's a lot of material about the origins of that type of astrology and how Western astrology came to be as well. And it's really fascinating. If you're wanting to study that, there's definitely let me know, and I'd be happy to connect you with various books, various sources that can bring you more illumination to that. But one of them is a great one that it's not a very long book in comparison to some of these others, but it does give you some really good information. Robert Powell and his book History of the Zodiac. It was his doctoral thesis, according to what I've read, and he turned it into a published book later in I think it was the mid 2000s. So again, this is it's really interesting, and both have their own validity. It's not that one's better than another. It's not like, oh, this you gotta no, that's the real astrology, that's the fake astrology. No, that's they're coming from different points of view, different perspectives. The sidereal is essentially star based, and they're deeply connected to particular prime stars, and there's a connection to a concept or things that are connected to the nakshatras, which have to do with the moon and lunar mansions, and there's all these other things that are kind of woven into it that altogether it's like, oh, this is Vedic astrology. Um, so again, this is a totally different part, but I wanted to comment on that for those that may be confused about the differences between Western astrology, which is sign based, and sidereal or Vedic astrology, which is essentially star based. But they do deal with the signs. It's just that they have a different way of going about it. Okay, so what does what does astrology do for us here? What does it do for us? And I'm moving my little window here over there so you can see the text. Um, it does astrology highlights our relationship to the cosmos. It gives us an understanding of our nature. And I'd like to comment on that particular word, and that's something in a future book I want to write is the word understanding. Its origin comes from essentially standing under the stars. You're standing under something, um, and you are getting, there's some knowledge that's coming through. Some, that there's a particular slices of knowledge and information you're getting, and it's creating perhaps epiphanies. It's creating a way to put things together, maybe different types of knowledge that comes in that you haven't experienced, but then fill in the gaps. It's literally understanding, standing under. So that's why standing on the earth, as the subtitle of this video, is that we are understanding. We're standing on the earth, but under the sky. Other what other things that astrology does for us it's essentially a way to uh, put order into our world, order from chaos, but also not to diminish chaos or to put it away, but showing the importance of the relationship between order and chaos and what chaos represents for all of us, and how chaos is a fertile ground, if you will, for creation. We wouldn't have created systems and structures and paradigms, if you will, without some level of chaos that sort of seeded what we have today. So there is a greater purpose there, if you will. Astrology also shows us our own personal, individual journey and humanity's collective journey, our journey through time, as various civilizations, nations, cities, communities, through cultures, through time, linear time, but also helping us understand, especially since this is interesting. A little sidebar topic. There's an astrologer, Dane. Long since passed away. Dane Rudyar, Rudyar, and he wrote this book. I'm rereading currently about the outer planets of Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, and how it connects us to beyond the linear, beyond our individual sort of interplanet relationship, our that sort of that closed in relationship. We now are expanding our vision into a more greater perspective. And Neptune and Uranus in particular, Pluto also to some degree, deals with something, a concept called nonlinear time. There's sort of this outside the fourth dimension, or and definitely interacting with it and what that represents. So it's humanity's um, evolution and involution into itself and beyond itself all at the same time. And it's we experience things here in the third dimension, but there is much more beyond that space. Okay, and then the other thing here is that astrology symbolically represents all of our stories. If you um, read the mythologies, if you read the throughout the world and throughout history, there's been um, many stories. I mean, I would say the vast majority of them, especially in ancient times, had to do with the sky, our relationship to the sky, the constellations, the planets, the sun and moon. All of that was, uh, represented in stories, either through oral traditions or written traditions. They were connected into that, and there's a in certain circles. This book is fairly famous. It's called Hamlet's Mill. It's a very dense read. Hamlet is in the play Hamlet, Hamlet, and it talks about the mill and how it's the turning of the world, the turning of an age, and the authors really get into divining and getting into through their just extraordinary research, all and how a lot of these stories are connected to long time periods in history. And for those that are interested in that, that's definitely a book that I fully recommend. Again, it's a fairly dense read, and it's worth. Like I've reread it. I've read it maybe 3 times, and I'm thinking about rereading it again because there's so much packed into it, and I want to understand it better as I move forward. Now, lastly, what I'd like to share here is exercises um, that you can do on your own here. Since this is a class, again, this is on your own. This isn't something you got to necessarily report to me. You're welcome to share with me, or if there's a particular question, feel free to ask. I'm always open to correspondence here. So I encourage everyone, if they haven't seen this for themselves, to get a hold of an astrology chart, their own personal astrology chart. There's free ones available at astro.com. And connect like on some of these things that I've talked about. Feel and observe and participate with your life. In a more conscious way, especially around connecting with the seasons and with the sky. So some of what you can do, noticing your thoughts and feelings during major phases of the moon cycle. That one is a relatively easy one to do for people that are real new to this. The moon is an easy object to follow, uh, depending on where you live. Like where I am here in the Northwest U.S., it's Oregon, Western Oregon in particular. It tends to be cloudy and rainy a lot in the fall and winter months, and so you don't see the moon as often. But I would encourage people to do that. Also, spending time with the stars, just being there with them. It's not about necessarily having to divine everything and know each individual name of each individual star, but just being with them and being able to slowly over time see the patterns. Maybe have a sky map with you, either on your mobile device or a sky and telescope magazine, whatever works for you. That's a way. I did that myself for many years actually. along with taking uh, courses from Daniel Giamario about the night sky. Writing down and or meditating on remembered dreams while finding out what the planets are up to. This is a little more advanced one, finding out what the planets are up to, but the dreams will also communicate too what's going on within you, and that could communicate to what correspond to what maybe initiations you may be experiencing or astrology cycles you may be experiencing. So that's one way to do that, an exercise. Another one is to create a vision board while keeping in mind your moon, sun, and rising signs and looking at what imagery comes up. And this is why it could be important of going on astro.com, or if you have an astrology program or some other resource, maybe a friend or an astrologer that you know can give you your natal chart, or even getting a reading. That could be also very, very helpful. Um, this is a way to kind of connect into yourself and having that, building that relationship as above, so below, as within, so without. One of the main principles of shamanic astrology itself, or what Daniel Giamaro calls the shamanic astrology paradigm. Um, and so I look at it as more of a system, and some guidelines, and it's not here to necessarily create any dogma around that, but just guidelines and opening up the curiosity, opening up the mind, the heart, the soul to experience and explore. And these are ways to do that for yourself. So well, that's what I've got for you in this class, and I want to thank everyone who was curious about this and watch this. Again, this is just something I want to do, is to be of service here, and there will be other courses out there that I'll do in the future, and I'm just happy to be a part of this, and the magic, the breath of creation itself. Thanking Great Spirit, all the planets, the elements, and all of our relations. So, thank you all for watching this, and uh, you know coming to the end of the video here. But I look forward to hearing from you in the future, and dream well out there. There is much more than what as saying goes. This is not all that we are. There is more there. I wish everyone the best and to take care, and peace and love. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, Eric Roth, for this informative lesson that really gives us some tools that we can use as we navigate our way. Let's hear some ways that people can work with you. I know people are going to want to sign up for sessions with you, and you've got several options.
Yes, the very first option would be for a person that wants a full look at their life and their timings and their life goals. That would be a personal astrology reading, a full session, be about 90 minutes. And that's something I could go into their astrology chart and look at the astrological timings or transits in their life. The another one, if they've already had a first session with me, would be an hour of an update, which would look at primarily the timings, the transits astrologically that are going on in their life, and any questions that have come up, even from a previous reading, or any new insights or things that have been inquired about, have been revealed, and to share during that session. There are other sessions that I do. There's a shorter session, a 30-minute session for people that want just a real basic level reading, and that's absolutely offered. I also do couple readings, synastry readings, where there's looking at two charts together, either through family or a couple, married, or partners, or even in business. Those are usually from 90 to 120 minutes, depending on uh, uh, if you've had a personal session with me prior to that or not. And I also do customized astrology readings different lengths and different topics depending on what you're wanting to look at. And that's usually more specialized, more specifics. And then of course there is a astrolocation reading, which is becoming something that I'm doing more and more of in recent years. So that is and it could be coupled with transits. I usually look at the transits when I'm looking at astrolocation, looking at different locations on where a person may want to relocate in their life.
That's interesting, the astral location, as people are feeling a migration of the heart. And so, how does that work? Can you share just a little bit about that astral
Yes.
location?
Thank you, Lauren. Yes, it is. It's taking your chart as if you were born elsewhere on the planet. So if you came to me, if a person came to me and said, "Oh, I'm living in North Carolina, but I'm thinking of relocating to, on the West Coast, and or to Phoenix, perhaps," and they want to check out what's there for them. What astrolocation or even what it's known as also astrocartography is taking the birth chart as if they were born in that city or in that location at the very same moment. And so they would have different um, rising sign, they would have a different angles to the chart. The planets would remain the same, but the chart itself would look different. And it could be something that could be more beneficial depending on the stage of life that they're in and what they're trying to get into. But yes, I would just as if they were born in a certain city, and it could be as long as they're I know the geographical coordinates on the planet. I could do a relocation chart for them.
Fascinating. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Your sessions are popular with our audience, and we encourage those who resonate with this topic to sign up for a session with Erik Roth. Those sessions are available here on this webpage, and he is booking now for all of those variations. Thank you. Erik, would you like anything else to say as we close?
Just thank you very much for having this opportunity to be here, Luann, and I hope everyone that is curious about this to give it a try. You might discover some things about yourself that you weren't aware of, or get some confirmation about your life path. So please feel free to reach out, and if you need further information before doing a reading, please let me know.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. It's great to be here.
Namaste.